Hi, everyone. It'll be best if you put on your gallery view for the best viewing of this webinar. I'm Wendy Hoenig, the Artistic Director of the Judy Levis Markoff Boca Raton Jewish Film Festival. I am zooming in from Maine and hope you're all doing well and that you've been enjoying the virtual programming. Enormous gratitude to Leslie Rich, our festival program director. He makes it all happen. I want to thank Judy Levis Markoff, Stephanie Owitz, Jen Giacone, and the entire Sandler Center JCC staff who are working so hard to bring arts and culture programming to you, especially during these challenging times. Thank you to IFC Films and Tamar Simon from Mean Streets Management for putting this webinar event together and making this program possible. We are honored to have with us today Jonathan Yakubovich, Matthias Schweighofer, Jesse Eisenberg, and Gazer Rohrig. I hope that you had to read their bios that were emailed to you. Our discussion here is so timely, as today is the beginning of the 3 weeks of the mourning of the destruction of the Jewish temple. It is a time for us to reflect upon the Holocaust and in the history of the Jewish people. This film is very powerful, both to remember the tragedy of the Holocaust and also the strength and survival of the Jewish people against all odds. Many of you have sent in questions, and if you have other questions or comments, please write them in the chat box. So first, I'd like to welcome our panelists who are all zooming in from. Jonathan, where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Los Angeles, in California.
Oh, great. And Jesse? Jesse, where are you zooming in from?
I'm in Bloomington, Indiana.
Okay. Geza, where are you zooming in from?
I'm from the Bronx, New York.
Okay. Matthias, where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Berlin, Germany.
Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to Boca Raton. Jonathan, everyone has heard of Marcel Marceau and yet do not know this story. How did you come to this story?
Well, I also didn't know the story. I didn't even know that Marcel was Jewish, and that was what immediately got my attention. How is it that someone so famous and so influential, you know, I didn't know something so important about him? And I started doing research, and I was able to track down his first cousin, George Loinger, who was 106 years old when I met him. He was the head of the Jewish Boy Scouts of France during the war, and he's the one that invites Marcel to join the group at the beginning of the movie. And we met in Paris, and he told me, you know, a lot of what you will see in the movie. He's the character that Geza plays in the film. And after hearing the story firsthand from him, I knew there was nothing I could do with my life before I was able to make this film. And that's what I did. You know, it's just such an unknown story and nearly forgotten story that I felt was very important to tell. And that's how we did it.
Jonathan, how close to reality was this film?
Well, the story takes place in 7 years, from 38 to 45, and it's you know, we only have 2 hours, so there was a lot of condensing, a lot of combining characters and combining events to give it dramatic coherence. And also Marcel at the beginning of the war is a lot younger than the way he's portrayed in the film, and so I always tend to say it's inspired by a true story. Make sure that, you know, if there are some nuances that were not exactly the way they happened, you know, it's forgiven. But as far as I can understand, based on my research and all the testimonies and the research I did in the Museum of the Resistance in Lyon, and meeting with the Nazi hunters who found Barbie in Bolivia, the Klarsfelds, it's pretty close to the essence of it all, to the emotional arc of it all, and all the situations are, you know, real as far as I can tell. I was never able to confirm if the face-to-face meeting between Marcel and Barbie took place, but it is true that Barbie was chasing these kids, and that Marcel and his group knew that they were running away from Barbie. So if they were able to get that meeting or not, it's something I cannot confirm, but it was very important to have the hero and the villain of the story, you know, face each other at some point.
Jonathan, was the film inspired by family members of yours that were killed during the Holocaust?
Well, not this. I mean, the only character that is inspired in a family member is the character of Elspeth, the little girl who develops a closer relationship with Marcel. She was inspired by my aunt, who survived the war, hidden in an orphanage. She, you know, I couldn't find a specific story of the kids that Marcel saved. So instead of coming up with something from scratch, I thought it would be, you know, better to inspire it in a true story of a Holocaust survivor that I know really well. In fact, my aunt's name is Elspeth, just like the character. But the rest are not related to my family, even though both sides of my family were victims and survivors of the war. And it was clearly part of my emotional inspiration to take on this project, but the stories are not related to mine.
Thank you. Jesse, what was it like to become Marcel Marceau? Did you prepare for this role? To through that French accent?
Well, like you had said earlier, like not a lot of people knew this story, and I certainly didn't. But when I started reading about Marceau, I realized like his father and my family came from the same area of southeastern Poland, that he was kind of, you know, an artist who was like performing his one-man shows at, you know, as it's seen in the movie, at these kind of like, you know, dive bars. And I could relate to so much of that. And so to like, you know, even though he was French and 70 years older than me, and living through a time I hope to never have to live through, you know, I think there were so many similarities in terms of like the actual like practical, am I okay? Are you here? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I took like a ton of mime classes, like about 6-7 months of mime training with a wonderful teacher who taught me about Marceau. He had trained with him. My teacher had trained with Marceau for years in Paris. And so by the time we were actually on set in Europe, I felt like kind of not only prepared, but really, I don't know, excited by the opportunity to play somebody doing this incredible thing.
Oh, okay, Jesse, for Geza now, how did you get involved in this wonderful film, and how did you prepare for this role?
My agent sent me the script, and then soon after I talked with Jonathan on the phone a couple of times, and the script was very compelling, obviously a great story, sort of hard to believe that no one made a movie about this before. And the preparation, well, I tried mostly online, you know, to read myself into the material, especially of the life of George. And I didn't even know at the time, should I pronounce his last name Loinger or Loinger, which I think is probably the better way to do it in French. And you know, I was extremely impressed by him. I mean, he was a phys ed teacher, a physical education teacher, and such a courageous and humble hero. And I was really sad to receive, was it December 28th, I think, 2 years ago, a text message from Jonathan on the day when he passed away, because I didn't have the privilege, unlike Jonathan, to meet him in person. He was 108 at the time he passed away, and we all hoped for him to see the movie, not knowing, of course, about COVID or anything at the time, but yeah, so it was mostly me doing research.
Geza, did you get a, do they know about Marceau in Hungary?
Very much so. Actually, weeks after I was born in '68, he came first time in Hungary, and there was a whole sort of debate. Later I heard from this, about this. There were some people who were concerned. Why is he coming? Why is he legitimizing a communist country by coming, so to speak? There was this line of argument within the intelligentsia, but he was you know, an artist, and he had his reasons. He probably didn't want the people feel isolated. He went to the Soviet Union as well, and he was very loved and welcomed, just like Louis Armstrong at the time. Anybody from the West coming to Hungary at the time was so much, you know, awaited and celebrated. And so I spoke with people actually over the phone after I got the role, who were there at several times. He came 3 times to Hungary, I believe, and always packed house. And the first time I think he did it without music. The second 2 times it was more like an ensemble with music and with others as well. And he had a very strong fan club or following or popularity in Hungary, for sure.
Thank you. Matthias, you are both the producer of the film and you play the crazy, monstrous character of Klaus Barbie. In this role, you are so charming, both likable and despicable all at the same time. My understanding is that this is not a usual role. It's a very unusual role for you. And what was it like to become Klaus Barbie? Matthias, are you there? I'm not here.
No, there we go. Yeah, Klaus Barbie. Yeah. First, honestly, when Jonathan was sending me the draft and was asking me if I want to play Klaus Barbie, I didn't know Klaus Barbie. Klaus Barbie was totally new for me, and I thought, okay, because I knew Marcel Marceau and I loved the story of Marcel Marceau and his work, and but I never knew this story we told, and I never heard of Klaus Barbie before. And then I started, you know, reading all this historical stuff, and Jonathan was sending me books, and I started to prepare for the character, because the interesting is the Klaus Barbie, his whole life, everything he did, and even after the Second World War was even crazy too. You know, that I was so shocked that we never learned in school in Germany about Klaus Barbie, that I thought, okay, I have to play this part. I have to do the best I can do to make him, human. He is not an alien. He's a human being, and he did this his whole life. You know, these crazy and bad things. So I start to prep with reading everything, where he was coming from, why he was, and why he became the man he was his whole life. So that's how I started to prep.
So Matthias, how was it working with Jonathan on this role?
I love Jonathan. Jonathan is like, he's a very tolerant and very, very nice and loving director. And he always gave us all the opportunity we always felt welcome to say something, to change something, to have an idea and not throw it away, throw it in, throw everything in. And if I could use it, if I like it, I would love to do it. So that was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
So, Matthias, tell us what happened to Klaus Barbie after the war until his death in 1991.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. This is another movie. This is Jonathan. What would you say? You're better with that story.
Well, I mean, the thing about Barbie is that he was first recruited by American intelligence services to start spying on the Eastern Germans, and he started. I mean, a lot of the intelligence knew each other, obviously because of the Nazi apparatus. So, believe it or not, Barbie started working for America, and then through that, the paperclip program, he was able to change his identity and fly to Bolivia, where he ended up also establishing the security apparatus of a horrible dictatorship there that, it's in a way the first narco state in history. And he tortured people there, and he created, a reign of terror over there as well. He was even involved in the capture of Che Guevara. I mean, it's an incredible, crazy human who never stopped. And then many years later, he was so comfortable in Bolivia that he went to France in a trip with business people. And the mother of a victim of Barbie recognized him in a picture in the newspaper. And she brought the picture to the Klarsfelds, the Nazi hunters, and said, this is Klaus Barbie. And they ended up flying to Bolivia and chained themselves to a square and made, years and years of demonstrations until the government was overthrown and he was finally sent to France, and where he stood trial and was sentenced to life for crimes against humanity.
So Jonathan, please talk about the intense scene on the train. I was on the edge of my seat. Did Marcel Marceau actually meet Klaus Barbie?
Well, I was saying earlier that that's the meeting face to face is the one that I was unable to confirm if it happened the way it's described in the film, but it was important to have a face to face meeting between the characters. Shooting that scene was pretty challenging because all the characters are there. It's Marcel, it's Emma, it's Marcel's brother Alain, it's Barbie, it's Elspeth, it's the children, everyone in a real period train, because we shot it in a real train in a real station in the Czech Republic. But all that contribute to the level of tension that we had, and the scene between Marcel and Barbie, it's the last scene I wrote. It was something that came up during the rehearsal process and collaborating with both Jesse and Matthias. I remember Matthias saying I'm missing another reason why I would let them go, because he just didn't feel real that Barbie would let them go easily. And that's how I came up with the dialogue about the daughter and all that stuff, which, in a way, you think it may be a strategy that Barbie's using to disarm Marcel, but it ends up being a way in which Marcel is disarming Barbie and giving him advice he really cares to hear. And that's why he ends up believing that this guy has nothing to hide and goes back, to see his wife and kid, so it was a direct product of the collaboration between me and Jesse and Matthias. It's one of the privileges of working with, this level of talent that, you can always look better because they're smarter than you and they know their characters better than you at some point. And I agree, it's my favorite scene in the film, and it's really thanks to their talents.
I have to say that was a very rich scene and a rich moment in the film because of the different cultural ideology of a Nazi and a Jewish artist coming from different worlds. And then the Nazi asks the Jew, what's the best way to raise my daughter? And Marcel says to be curious, let her figure it out, and don't push her. The Nazi ideology runs completely counter to this. And therefore, I think it was such an important moment in the film. And I'm so glad that you all put that in. Jesse, what was it like knowing what a likable guy Matthias is and having to interact with him as a crazy, monstrous Nazi?
Yeah, it was probably, I mean, it was a surreal experience. I mean, anytime you're working with somebody that you have an adversarial relationship with as characters, but a friendly relationship with in person, you know, that happens all the time, obviously, because it's the nature of drama. But this was particularly unusual because the character Matthias is playing also is charming. And so there's this very strange overlap that occurs when the actor, who's very sweet and nice and thoughtful, and we are friends, is charming in a kind of similar manner to the villain in, you know, in the character's life. And so I imagine, if that scene did occur, that Marceau would have also felt kind of confused by the instinct he must have had to be charmed by a man who represents an existential threat and the worst parts of humanity. And, it's like, I guess, how Hannah Arendt described the banality of evil. Maybe the corollary with that, or a cousin of that, is the charm of evil, that evil can also be, be packaged in something that is appealing and friendly. And without knowing the content of it, and with only knowing the aesthetic of it, it could be, seem friendly. And in a way that's obviously scarier because we can't spot it, and more confusing because it runs counter to everything we know about how to protect ourselves.
Thank you. Matthias, please talk about the location, shooting in the empty swimming pool at the Terminus Hotel. What a name, and such a cold, horrible, frightening, weird location for an execution. What did it feel like making this swimming pool scene?
Honestly, I have to say, because the whole location anyway was so cold and was so scary that we had this little piano there, and we did this little beginning of Barbie playing a song on the piano. And the truth was, because everything was so big and cold, that the powerful feeling I had, because I controlled the situation, was weird. Because it was me as Matthias, it was horrible to know that that it was the truth, it was real. There was a time that where this was a real situation, and to act in it, and to act in this crazy location was totally scary. But it was, to be honest, a very powerful situation, because I controlled everything.
So is it factual that Klaus Barbie executed people in this swimming pool?
Jonathan, honestly, I don't know. We had a lot of, we had this chamber, this torture chamber, but the pool, was that historical, right?
Well, it was, I mean, they had different places. The entire hotel was set up. 2 stories of the hotel were set up for torture, because they torture dozens of people a day, members of the resistance. And the pool was an adjacent location that they had for executing people. It wasn't as close to the torture chambers as you see in the film, but it was a real location that Barbie used for executions.
Okay, Jonathan, W.C. Fields says, never work with children or animals. Talk to us about the children that were in the film. Where did you find these amazing children, and how was it working with them?
Yeah, I mean, working with children and working in the snow is usually what they tell you not to ever try, you know, and we did it both at the same time. And it was an incredible experience. I mean, these kids, we found them at the Jewish school in Prague. They were, most of them, Jewish kids who knew this story really well because their grandparents were this, you know, part of it. And they were so emotionally engaged, and they became so close to Jesse that most of the emotions that you see in the film were real. You know, there wasn't a lot of acting going on. They were truly getting into the role and getting into the situations fairly quickly, and they were also laughing when Jesse was pantomiming for them, and truly, it was truly moving to see. We rehearsed together, and it was very special, I think, for Jesse too, to see the effect of what he's been practicing for months, and see that, because, you know, kids can laugh when they're acting, but when they're laughing for real, it's different, and it's very easy to tell. It may not be as easy to tell if you shoot it well, but in person, it's definitely very easy to tell if they're just pretending. And those kids were really entertained by Jesse, and it was very moving for all of us. They were staying at the castle when we were shooting, so it was like a Harry Potter experience for them, living in a castle and shooting a movie during the day. So it was very special, and the kids were amazing. Bella Ramsey is actually the only one of them who is a professional actress. She was in Game of Thrones and has an entire career in the UK and is a phenomenal actress. And she became very close to us, and she's really one of the most talented people I've ever worked with.
Jesse, do you have anything to add to that about working with the children?
Yeah, I mean, it was just the most unusual experience because, as you know, as Jonathan said, the kids were not like trained actors who had worked a lot or had done similar jobs, and so they were completely open and reacted spontaneously and authentically. And so as Jonathan kind of mentioned, I had been practicing my mime like every day for months in a room by myself, and when we started actually filming the movie, I had gotten to that kind of place that we all get to when we're practicing a new skill, where it just feels futile and doesn't feel like you'll ever make any progress, and it doesn't feel fun anymore. And so I was kind of at that frustrating stage of learning a new skill set when I started performing for the kids, and the kids were just totally engaged, laughing, loving it. It occurred to me, and there was also a language barrier because these kids they spoke English, but Czech was their first language. And there was something about performing the mime, which is a universal, language, and accessible and fun and both poetic, but also childish and simple, that just kind of bridged this gap so immediately and beautifully that it kind of made me feel, so confident in my ability, and also kind of made the mime feel fun again.
Thank you. Geza, how was it working with the children? Do you feel that having at one point been a kindergarten teacher, was that experience helpful?
Definitely, sure. I for years and years, I was a kindergarten teacher. It wasn't that long ago, Wendy. And it was quite a challenge because my mother tongue is not English, and I was teaching them Hebrew. So it was at times they understood my Hebrew better than my English. But it got better, and I used a lot of singing and guitar, and I took them to the roof and we were acting out things, and role playing was a huge way to get closer to them. But I didn't have as much interaction in this movie with the kids as Jesse did. But I did the movie after I did In Resistance. I had lots of scenes with kids, and then my kindergarten teacher years came really handy.
Great, thank you. Jonathan, so Bella is English, and the children, did they speak English to her? Was that what I'm understanding? or how did Bella communicate with the children? How did that work?
They spoke some English, some of them better than others, but they spoke in Czech between them, and Bella explained really beautifully the other day how, in a way, that felt that helped her with the character, you know, to feel like a person who just lost her parents and is in a different world. And she had a great relationship with the kids, but most of the day when she was with them, she didn't understand what they were talking about. And it was a surreal experience for her. She was also a bit older than all of them, because Bella looks younger than she is. So she looks their age, but they were younger than her. But they all really loved her, and it was a great relationship.
Oh, great. So, what was it like? Well, I want to say one thing. Now, Geza, you know that you have a fan club in Boca Raton. We were so blessed to have you there for To Dust, and we adore you. So I want to tell you that you have so brilliantly played the part of a Jew in Son of Saul, and then To Dust, and now in Resistance. What is your personal Jewish background and connection?
Wow, that could be a little longer to answer, really. But I'm a practicing Jew, and grew up in a communist country. So tradition and religion and learning about it and going to Israel was my choice. It's obviously a personal journey, which we can't go into any details. But it's certainly something I breathe and care and read and feel about, you know, all the time in my life.
So, Geza, what was it like working with Jesse and Matthias, being on set with the German crews?
Well, Jesse, I hope I don't feel this by myself, Jesse, but I consider Jesse as a friend, and we met in New York since then, and we keep in touch. And Jesse is very interested about the world. I mean, he was asking me even during the shoot about, you know, my take about the current Hungarian political situation, or as you know, about my experience as an immigrant, as a Jew in America. Where do I stand on this issue, that issue? Jesse is a vivid, active intellectual, very currently involved in the happenings of the day. And I don't know how he does it, because he has, you know, a full career as an actor. He's a playwright. And meanwhile, I always was a step, or maybe more than one step behind, when it comes to be informed about what's going on. So I wish I could see him more. It was a lovely experience to work with Jesse.
Thank you. Jonathan, there was an effective theme of father and child that was very special in the film. Bella and her father, and then Marcel and his father. Could you please talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of what Marcel revels to is the imposition of his father wanting him to just be a butcher and just do something more, you know, normal, you know, to make a living. And the father is presented in a way where he has no idea what art is, and is intrigued by you know, his son's passion for art. And then, you know, it's revealed that his father actually does have an artistic side, and he was simply trying to repress it all his life, and he was trying to impose that on his son out of fear, basically, because a butcher would never be hungry, is what he says. You know, at the end of the day, there is a survival aspect to his story. He was already an immigrant that came from Poland, escaping anti-Semitism before the war, and went to France. And, you know, there's a lot of fathers who just want to educate their children to make sure they're able to make a living. And it's an important part of that. And it's a theme of the film, because also that's what Barbie is in front of Marcel. He's a father who wants to get his daughter to become interested in the arts, and what Marcel says to him is the story of himself, is push him in the opposite direction. He basically admits that he became who he became because his father pushed him in the opposite direction. And I do think it's a big part of many artists, you know, that they are reacting to something. And I found very compelling when I learned about Marcel and his relationship with his father, and the fact that such a sophisticated artist grew up in a butcher shop, basically, because the butcher shop was part of the house. I found fascinating, and a universal theme that I think it's worth exploring.
Thank you. Jesse, anything to add about the relationship between Marcel and his father?
Yeah. Oh, can you hear me now? Yes. Yeah, I mean, you know, it struck me as this, like, you know, especially in the scene that I have on the train, where these, as you mentioned, Wendy, these two different kind of like competing ideologies about how we, you know, what we expect from our children and how we expect to raise them, and the kind of flexibility we have with regards to them kind of exploring on their own things that we would see as like risky. And, you know, I think, like, you know, Jonathan, I think, painted this relationship in a way that feels just so authentic to me. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I guess maybe authentic to the Jewish experience, which is one of, you know, because it's a group that's often alienated from society, but also a curious group of people. There's this kind of push and pull of wanting to kind of be in the establishment and have the security of, like, you know, being in secure industries or commerce. But then there's also this, like, gnawing curiosity to kind of explore and progress different ideas and have radical thoughts and be part of, you know, whether it be, you know, radical political movements or in radical and, you know, the arts. And so that's actually what's happening in the movie, is like these characters are having this very authentic and very kind of Jewish reconciliation of how to kind of proceed in a uncertain world.
Thank you. Jesse, again, the Resistance ends with your beautiful performance after General Patton spoke to the troops. As an American, it brought the story home even more deeply. Can you talk about that choice?
Yeah, I mean, Marceau's first performance, you know, he says in that character was for the troops. After the war, he became a translator for, I guess, the American Army. And, you know, as Marceau said in a speech he gave in the early 2000s, that his first review was in the Stars and Stripes newspaper, you know, which is the newspaper of the military. And what I loved about the scene is that, you know, here's this guy who's performing possibly the most avant-garde, least, you know, masculine seeming of the creative performance arts, and yet he's performing it for, you know, arguably the most masculine kind of macho group of people. But because both of them had been through such horror, they kind of are able to emotionally meet on the same page. At the end of the performance, you know, Marceau is kind of miming walking through a field of bodies after losing his, you know, partner, his girlfriend, or in the case of the soldiers, losing a, you know, a comrade. Well, comrade's not the right word. Gaze is gonna. But anyway, the you know, as they but they're connecting on that level. And it's, I also think it, like, speaks to the beauty of mime, which is that it's, like, abstract enough to be universal, but specific enough to kind of have a narrative. And I think that's why kids appreciate it and why it was appropriate for that moment as well.
Jesse, can you tell us about the location where you filmed General Patton's speech and the Marceau performance for the American troops? Where was the location?
It was like, it's called the Congress Hall in Nuremberg. It was, I would call it like an attempted arena because it was unfinished. It was absolutely the largest kind of building like that. I forgot where the Dolphins play, but it's about that size. For a kind of local reference, if I was a stand-up comic, I'd get a laugh or an applause. It's something like that in scope, but it was unfinished and crude and empty, and so it was terrifying. It was just such a kind of surreal experience that the art we were making which was about history that actually occurred, and we were doing it in this place where it all happened. And so there was this strange confluence of like arts and history, and in some way revenge, that here we are kind of like, I'm a Jewish actor doing this movie, doing this kind of very, again, kind of, sensitive performance of mime at a place where, Hitler was intended to give these, massive and horrifying rallies. And so there's just this kind of strange moment where all these things intersect and create, I'd say, more meaning than the average good movie scene.
Thank you. Jonathan, while watching Resistance, I thought it had a connection to contemporary times. This historic subject seemed to me to have a warning not to blame minorities, immigration, or any specific group. Was that intentional?
I mean, yes. I mean, I think it's unfortunately something that doesn't go away. One of the few things you can count on human beings is hating minorities and finding a scapegoat and blaming them for their ills. And I do think it's inevitable when you watch a movie about that to find, what's currently happening that resembles that. And unfortunately, the Jewish people has an entire encyclopedia of experiences to display how you can abuse a minority. And nowadays, I think worldwide there is a rise of intolerance and populism that's probably going to get worse now with the crisis that's already developing. And I do find that it's important to continue telling the stories and thinking about them and sharing them with a new generation, because it's not, it's not comparable in any way to what was happening during the war. But if there is something that Matthias and I really work hard, is to portray a Klaus Barbie as a human being, because the only way to avoid this happening again is if you realize that this was perpetrated by human beings. It's not monsters, it's not aliens, it's not people from different worlds that came and took over a nation and killed, millions. It's humans who are capable of doing that level of damage and thinking that they are on the right side of history and thinking that they're heroic. And if some humans were able to do it, other humans can do it too. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge that, because it's our duty to stay vigilant so it never happens again.
Jonathan, could you please talk a little bit about your family's experience in Venezuela and having to leave?
Well, both my parents came to Venezuela after the war. They were born right after the war in post-war Poland. My grandparents, after losing most of their family, went back to Poland to see if they could make a living, in the place they knew. And after years, they realized it was impossible. So they went to Venezuela, and in Venezuela, they had a terrific life, and they both became university professors. And Venezuela was an extremely open country and extremely generous with the Jews and immigrants. And then, in 1998, Hugo Chavez was elected, and everything started to change, and systematic anti-Semitism started happening, and that combined with a developing crisis, and everybody started leaving. And when he got in power, it was 45,000 Jews. There's less than 3,000 right now. and those who are there are mostly trying to leave. And it was very eye-opening for me, who grew up as a kid whose parents were, you know, children of the Holocaust, and I was always told that things can change in the place where you are, and a nation can love you and love the Jews, and then suddenly, you know, things change and you have to go. It's something that you hear but you never believed. But I was unlucky that it happened to my country as well. And, you know, hopefully it would change at some point. You know, we have a very difficult situation there, but a lot of people are doing what they can to change it. I was lucky yesterday to have a conversation with the ambassador of Venezuela for the Guaido government, which is, you know, the democratic government that most of the world recognizes. And it was the first positive interaction that I've ever had with a public official from Venezuela in my entire life. And I find hope in that, and things may be able to change. You know, I dedicate a lot of my time in helping change them, but it's a very difficult situation, and you know, it deserves an entire different conversation to go deeper into it.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask this to the panel. What do you want audiences to take away from this? And I will take it from any of you. Okay, should I call on someone? Okay, Jonathan, what would you like the audience to take away from this film?
I think the movie should speak for itself, and audiences should take away what they perceive from the film. You know, I think it relates to what we're going through right now. There is a moment in time where we feel the world is going through a horrible situation, and I think it's important that we get some perspective and see how much worse it was not too long ago, but also to take inspiration from the fact that it's civilian heroes who rescue these kids in the film. It's not an army, it's not weapons, it's just people taking responsibility for saving other people's lives. And that, I think it's an important message nowadays, where, you know, we're being, you know, attacked by this virus that no weapon can defeat. You know, the only people that can save us are civilians who went to the university to study medicine, and also ourselves, taking care of each other and you know, making sure that we all collaborate so we don't, you know, spread the disease. And it's I think it's a moment for citizen responsibility, and I think the movie speaks a lot about that.
Thank you. So I'll ask this to either Jesse or Geza, whoever wants to answer this. How is it working with people in locations where many of them had, you know, relatives who hated Jews or were in the Nazi Party? Any stories to share from conversations? Oh,
Yeah.
Jesse, unmute.
Should I start?
I think Jesse's talking, but
Oh, okay.
okay, go ahead.
You did it twice. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, but Geza, do you want to? I mean, all this is all for nothing. But
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, you know, I mean, yeah, certainly there was like an undercurrent of kind of curiosity, I would say, at least on my part, like, because you're sitting with people, you don't know their family history. You know, I mean, I tend, you know, so you're kind of, you know, half curious, half not wanting to bring it up for fear of hurting an otherwise nice relationship or something. But, you know, I had like there was like a kind of bodyguard for the cast. It was this guy who was like 6.5 feet tall, this guy, Jan, really sweet guy. And, you know, one point he kind of like started reluctantly telling me his family history. I only say reluctantly because, I don't know, I forgot the context of the conversation, but he ended up telling me about his grandfather who ran this kind of small power plant in this rural town. And it was this kind of old technology that only his grandfather knew how to run. And so because of his importance in this little town, he started saving people because he knew that the, Nazi party wouldn't, arrest him because he had too much value in this town. And so, that was like early on in the shoot, and it kind of started to reframe for me the kind of complexities of the war, and reminded me to not paint, people with the same monolithic brush.
Geza, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I love to work in international crew, and I don't think we mentioned Felix's name, Felix Moadi, who was playing Marcel's brother Alan.
Mm-hmm.
He's an excellent actor, very good friend, company, really talented director himself, by the way. Also, there was Alan's love interest in the movie, who was a fellow Hungarian actress by the name of Vica Kerekes. And then, of course, Clara, my wife, in the movie, who was a Czech actress. So I think I just love when people get together from all parts of the world to accomplish something and to put their best into the undertaking. And just one more thing, Wendy, when you asked previously about what we think we should, or the viewer should take away from this movie, one thing I liked probably the most in this movie is the fact that Jesse's role, Marcel Marceau, is not your usual type of hero. He was not recognizing right away the positive role or the opportunity to save kids here. He was sort of seeing it as an obstacle and almost a nuance. He's like, leave me alone. I don't want a part of this. I want to be fully dedicated to my art. And I think that's how it plays out a lot of times in lives, that there is something that we don't want at all. And then later on turns out that that's actually the best thing that could happen with us, because he found his true art through this action, to this project. And as a writer, because I'm as others, I also write, and I love that quote from Marcel Marceau when he says, "There is no lying in mime. You need words for that." So I got that sort of simplicity and honesty, and then no chance to cheat, which is fantastic. It's so easy to cheat on paper or on canvas or screen. But when it comes to mime, that sort of elementary challenge, I love that. And the only reason, by the way, I didn't mention Matthias is because I had no scenes with Matthias. I don't know yet Matthias as well. I really hope that there will be, chances for me to work with him.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask you, and this is really for all of you, so we'll start with somebody. What was it like to not have this film in the theater, but to have it virtually screened? And the other question that I had probably is for Jonathan. What's the distribution plan internationally for this film?
Well, the film already came out in theaters in New Zealand, and hopefully it's going to come out in theaters as countries start opening up. There is a plan for release in pretty wide release in Germany in September. Matthias can probably say if theaters are open or not, or if they're going to be open. Hopefully, yes. And it's a very unusual moment because some countries simply don't have theaters, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen. But it was always the plan that the movie was going to come out a lot earlier in the United States, and it was going to come out in the fall in the rest of the world. So in a way that helped us because it gave the world the opportunity to get better. And now in the places where theaters are being opened, the movie's going to open as well. But it's also already been released virtually in not only in the US, but also in the UK and in Italy. and in Australia. And it has been, to be completely honest, very good for the film. There's a lot of people watching movies at home, and it's been a very satisfying experience to see how many people are watching movies in streaming. Even though as a director you always want everybody to watch it in a big screen, you also want people to watch it in any way they can. And this moment is a very emotional and spiritual moment for a lot of people, and the movie has connected with a very wide audience that you didn't expect before. So it's been as good as it gets.
Thank you. My last question to each of you is, what is the next project that you're working on? Jonathan, let's start with you.
Well, I since this whole epidemic started, I started focusing on writing. I'm also a novelist, and I'm about to publish my second novel. I have a movie and a TV series that I have put together, but right now it's difficult to predict when it's going to start. Things are starting to move, but I don't want to say what's the next thing until we know what planet do we live, which I think it's changing every week.
And Matthias, tell me, what are you working on now?
I finished the movie last year, end of the last year, with Zack Snyder, and it's we do ADR now and post the movie, and then it comes out whenever, wherever, I don't know.
Thank you. And Jesse?
I wrote a book that's coming out on August 4th through Audible. It's called When You Finish Saving the World. And I adapted it to be a movie starring Julianne Moore, which we're supposed to film in October. So we're kind of in pre-production now, and I'm directing it. And if things kind of stay the same, then we'll be in production.
And Geza, what are you working on?
We were able, very luckily, to wrap up and finish a movie with Terrence Malick, and the movie is about the friendship of Jesus and Peter.
Thank you. So I just want to, in conclusion, well, do we have time? No, we ran out of time. In conclusion, I want to thank everyone for participating tonight. This recording will remain on our website for anyone who missed this exciting discussion. We are in very strange times, and I hope that you all enjoyed the film Resistance and tonight's webinar. We encourage you to share this with family and friends and support the artists and the filmmaker who created this incredible film and this important slice of history that many of us did not know. Once again, I want to thank Jonathan, Matthias, Jesse, and Geza. If anyone has not had the opportunity to see Resistance, go to the website resistance.movie and you can watch it at home. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. I'm looking forward to a time when we will all be in a theater together. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.